Hello, and thank you for joining this presentation on the City of San Diego's Inclusive Public Engagement Guide, and for your commitment towards contributing valuable insights towards our collective goal of more inclusive engagement with the city and our work in your communities. During this presentation, we will be sharing more about the guide, discussing different aspects of community engagement, and outlining our next steps for this project. We are here with the City Planning Department. The project team includes Anisha, the Program Manager for Public Engagement, myself, Kevin, a Senior Planner, and Vanessa, an Associate Planner, all focusing on public engagement. So I'm now going to pass it over to my colleague Anisha for the next slides.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. So this guide has a lot of information, and so we'd like to provide an overview that highlights some of the most important parts and also touch on its purpose. So this is our citywide organizational chart that you'll see on the screen, showing how the people of San Diego, our mayor, our city council, and our city departments are related to each other. Our city departments, boxed in red here, take care of our everyday services. So they maintain our public spaces like our streets, our parks, and our libraries. They oversee our essential services like our fire rescue department, and also develop citywide or community level initiatives that seek to enhance San Diego. What we wanted to highlight here is that the Inclusive Public Engagement Guide's focus is on our city departments. We have more than 12,000 employees and 30 city departments that have each done things a bit differently historically as it relates to public engagement. With this guide, we hope to start seeing public engagement happening in more consistent ways across the city. So our primary audience for this guide is city staff, and we've worked hard to make it a useful resource that will be helpful for staff at any level and with any prior degree of experience working on public engagement. However, we have also made this guide public so that you can fully understand how the city engages with you. This guide was intentionally formatted on web or online, and it is also searchable to increase its functional use. So some of the things that this guide includes is a section called About the Guide, and that includes why inclusive public engagement matters and what are our principles or values of public engagement. We also have a section about the history and background of public participation within the city. So this includes things like existing regulations related to this topic and the history of how certain groups of people have been excluded from decision making. Next, as part of this guide, we have identified who is underrepresented in decision making, which means who has been had their voices less heard by decision makers so that we can intentionally better reach and engage those people moving forward. We also have a section about how to implement public engagement and work with different stakeholders and partners to do so, which we'll touch on in just a bit here. And we've also collected engagement techniques and approaches, which are more than 30 different ways that we have for our city staff to share information with and collect input from the public. Next, we have a section on clear and inclusive communication, because we know that it all starts with the public understanding what we're doing and us communicating clearly if we want the public to be able to provide us input. And then finally, we have a section that we specifically wrote for the public called Get Involved with the City that provides tips and resources for how to get engaged with us. And this includes everything from volunteer opportunities to just simply how to stay informed of upcoming engagement opportunities and surveys. So public input can influence a lot of things at the City of San Diego. And we're going to just show a sampling of that. So we have, for example, plans. In 2021, our city council adopted the Parks Master Plan to plan for our current and future changing recreational needs. Within plans, we have policies, which reflect goals of the plan. So for example, one policy within this plan is to provide flexible and innovative park spaces, including neighborhood parks, public plazas, and temporary activated spaces to meet the city's future recreation needs. We also have programs that the city works on. So an example of a program is Parks After Dark, which activates community park spaces as festival spaces with games, food, and activities on summer nights to provide community members a safe place to play and come together. The city also works on projects. So this can be infrastructure projects. So for example, installing a new basketball court to create more opportunities for play. And finally, we work on regulations. So an example of that would be amending our land development code to allow for community gardens in more areas. So all of these things are just examples of the types of work that the city does. But importantly, these are all things that the public's input can influence. And so these are all things that our city staff will be using the Inclusive Public Engagement Guide for. So next, we want to distinguish some important terminology. Public participation, as it's defined in this guide, is the process through which the public receives information and shares input. When we refer to public outreach, that is more of a one-way process where the city is informing and educating. However, when we're talking about public engagement, that is the two-way process in which the city is sharing information, but we're also collecting input or feedback for decision-making. So this guide covers best practices for both of those. So to touch on the purpose of the guide, we discussed, we're aiming to increase our operational efficiency. So many of the projects that our city works on are really need the input from the public to be able to make our decisions, but we have so far lacked a more standardized way of doing so. We also see this as an opportunity to make better and more sustainable decisions over time once we have the benefit of community input. It's also an opportunity to build trust, where trust we know has diminished with government over time. And finally, we're looking at how to better reach and engage groups that have been less represented to, again, better intentionally reach and involve those people going forward. So to touch on our timeline, in 2023, our team started public and internal engagement on this guide to understand what people hoped to see captured in it. So we asked internally our city departments, and we also started public engagement, including convening a group of 10 community members from different communities throughout the city with varying levels of experience engaging previously with the city. We also hosted an online survey and started conversations with city-affiliated groups like community planning groups and working groups. And the drafting process started at that time and continued through 2025. So now the guide has been made available to the public, and we are seeking public input through October 19th and anticipating presenting this as an informational item to the City Council Rules Committee this November, which we'll touch on also in the next step section of this presentation. And so next, I mentioned that we have a section of the guide called Principles of Public Engagement. These again reflect the city's high-level values for public participation. So to cover those, we have 5 of them. The first is build community relationships. So that means fostering authentic and sustained connections between staff and the public and cultivating trust and mutual understanding. Next, we have communicate clearly. By that, we mean communicating information in accessible, understandable, and relatable ways and using plain language so that, again, people can really understand what's at stake. Next, we have commitment to engagement process. So we'll talk about our steps here in a moment, but this accounts for things like thoroughly researching which stakeholders may be impacted and following up after input has been provided. The next principle is inclusion. So by this, we mean actively inviting and welcoming participation from all people and groups and inviting diverse perspectives and backgrounds. And finally, we have transparency, which means clearly articulating the goals of our project, providing regular updates throughout a project, and sharing how input was considered, which can help San Diegans understand our processes and follow outcomes of our decisions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kevin to continue with the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Nisha. The underrepresented groups section includes qualitative and quantitative research on how we determined who is less represented in city decision-making, meaning their voices are less heard by decision makers. To understand this, we looked at the demographics of who has participated in city initiatives in the past, analyzed groups in San Diego that advocate for different causes, and asked the public who they saw as less represented in participation. We found that people of color and youth were the least represented groups. Understanding these underrepresented groups helps in implementing public engagement. We can plan for different ways to effectively engage and communicate with these people to better include them in our decision making. The Engaging Diverse Groups section includes information on how to tailor strategies to make our outreach and engagement more inclusive to different groups of people, including older adults, people experiencing homelessness, and those in emergency shelter, and more. For example, the Engaging Children and Youth section, which provides specific recommendations for sharing information and inviting input from youth, includes considerations before engaging, challenges and barriers to participation, and tips for outreach and engagement. So over the last few years, through our internal and public engagement process, we have identified common barriers to participation. Some barriers that were identified include a general lack of awareness and understanding of the city and its responsibilities, as well as gaps in information on opportunities to participate. Language barriers, limited access to reliable internet service or technology, structural exclusion, which are barriers like systemic disinvestment created by institutions like the government that can prevent access to participation, and lastly, limited time and competing demands, especially for those with fewer resources. These barriers inform the development of the guide, which includes processes that can help alleviate them. By implementing the guide and its recommendations, more people may be able to participate in the engagement process in the future. When project budgets can accommodate it, the city may provide participation support to decrease barriers to participation. This section includes guidance for things like gift cards, prizes, meals and refreshments, and childcare to make it possible for more people to participate. It's important that good process is followed for planning and conducting public engagement, so the Implementing Public Engagement section of the guide defines 8 steps for conducting effective public participation. In step 1, staff understand what project resources they have available, such as the staff capacity, time, and money available for the project. During steps 2 and 3, staff are to understand the project area and identify stakeholders. They may do this by reviewing past input received about the topic and conducting early interviews with stakeholders. During steps 4 and 5, staff will determine the level of participation and communicate clearly with how the public can provide input. In step 6, staff can create and implement a public engagement plan informed by stakeholders, research, and project resources available. Throughout step 6, staff will follow up with participants about how their input was used. Reporting back and following up is emphasized again in step 7. The guide provides recommendations on how the staff can report back to participants to show how they were heard, such as through a report back summary. And then lastly, in step 8, staff evaluate the engagement process to continuously improve future engagement processes. So the public also shared with us that it's important to work with engagement partners like community-based organizations, community planning groups, neighborhood associations, and businesses. There are tips for working for these different groups in the guide. For example, working with community-based organizations has a page where we outline how staff can create paid partnerships with them, why it's important to share information with them, and more. The guide also includes over 30 techniques and approaches for outreach and engagement. This includes things such as art-based engagement, community cafes, public service announcements, and visuals. There are also more traditional techniques such as public meetings or workshops. The guide walks through with staff how to implement each technique before, during, and after, as well as how much time, money, and staff capacity they will take. The Communicating with the Public section contains guidance to help staff make information clearer to the public. For instance, it provides clear information on simple and inclusive language, which is writing that is succinct and uses universal phrases that all people, all backgrounds can understand. Additionally, it has information on translation and interpretation, how to make documents accessible for people with sight, mobility, and hearing disabilities, guidance on public speaking, since staff need to clearly convey information to the public, which in turn helps the public better understand and provide input on city projects, information on facilitation of engagement events that provides guidance on how to create an inclusive engagement environment that is welcoming of all participants. So when staff follows guidance in this section, the city can increase the public's awareness and understanding of city projects. And lastly, we have a section called Get Involved with the City, where you can share with others how to participate with the city. This section includes an overview of what the city does, the public's role as voters and constituents in shared decision-making, different ways to volunteer or get involved, and specific guidance for how to effectively participate at public hearings. We hope this information gets the public to understand how to effectively get involved in decision-making. So some next steps for our project. We're anticipating presenting this as an informational item to the City Council Rules Committee in November 2025. And we're grateful to have grant funding from the San Diego Association of Governments, SANDAG, our regional planning agency, to train our staff and on this guide so that people in public-facing roles can feel confident in using this guide in their work. We will have staff training happening starting 2026, and funding will also go towards public workshops in 2026, where we will continue to share information about how the city works, what the city does, why it matters, and how the public can get involved in shaping decisions. You and others are welcome to provide comment on the guide online. You can do so by clicking the blue Provide Feedback button at the top right of any web page, which will open the comment form you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. Here on this comment form, you will provide your name, optionally provide how useful you find the page, and then describe any suggestions that you have for the page. So the guide is now available for public review at sandiego.gov/engagement. And in addition to commenting online using the comment feedback form, you can always email us with any questions or comments to our group email, which is engagement@sandiego.gov. So with that, we've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.